Welcome, wanderer. I am your guide tonight to take you with me in time. The story about a man in 18th century who measured the time by heart. In this story you will learn about the critical problem of measuring time and direction by sailors, how this man's unconventional genius solved it, and his long struggle for justice and lasting legacy. Isn't it interesting? Stay curious and get along with me. We carry time in our pockets. We glance at it on glowing screens. We schedule it, measure it, mourn it. But what is time, really? Is it the flicker of a flame, the hush between heartbeats, or the distance between now and then? Long ago, time wasn't seconds and hours. It wasn't digits on glass. It was something wilder, more fragile at sea. Time could kill you. A misjudged minute could lead a ship off course, into storms, or silence. And so, time became the most precious thing a sailor could hope to carry. But there was a problem. The world could not yet measure time. In a way the ocean would obey, and so the race began. A race not for gold, but for certainty. And one man, quiet, curious, untrained, would change everything. It's hard to imagine, isn't it, that for most of human history, no one could say exactly where they were on the ocean. You could know north and south. That was easy enough, measured by the height of the sun or stars. But east or west, longitude, was invisible. A ghost that drifted with the tide. Without longitude, a ship could be hundreds of miles off course and never know it. Some ran aground, others vanished into fog or reef. Time, they said, was the solution. But it wasn't just any time. You had to know what time it was. Back home, the moment you looked up at the sun, at sea, you had to compare it to a clock that never stopped being right. Not for waves, not for wind, not for years. But in the 1700s, clocks weren't ready. They were too delicate, too proud. They ticked with pendulums that swayed in calm rooms, not stormy decks. And so, in 1714, the British Parliament did something desperate. They offered a prize, £20,000, a fortune, to anyone who could find longitude at sea, within half a degree of error. It was more than money, it was hope. Trade depended on it, lives depended on it. Great minds turned to the heavens. They tried to track the moon, to build charts of stars, but their methods required perfect skies, and eyes trained like instruments. And far from London, in a quiet village of wood and wind, one man didn't look up at the stars. He listened instead to the heartbeat of a clock. John Harrison was born in 1693 in the quiet English village of Falby, Yorkshire. His father was a carpenter, a man who shaped wood for a living, and in that same spirit, John began shaping the invisible. He became a boy who listened. He had no formal education, no access to academies or observatories, but what he did have was time, and instinct, and a reverence for how things moved. By the age of 6, he fell ill with smallpox. Confined to his bed, he was given a watch to occupy the hours, and so he lay there, listening to its heartbeat tick by tick. He began to learn not just how time passed, but how it felt. He grew up around timber, and when he was old enough, he built his own wooden clock, a machine of motion and breath, crafted from oak and brass. No training, no guide, just curiosity. It kept perfect time. In an age when most clocks were unreliable, this one carved from nature was true, and it stirred something in him. Not ambition, but devotion. In his spare hours, he read books on astronomy and geometry. He studied the works of Newton, though he never met a scholar. He taught himself, not through formulae, but through feeling, through careful listening. He had an idea few dared to believe, that he, a man with no title, number patron, no reputation, could build a clock that would keep perfect time at sea, across storms, across seasons, across continents. Others said it was impossible, but John didn't need permission. In the year 1730, John Harrison traveled to London with his first sea clock, H1. It was a marvel of its time, a great machine of gleaming brass and intricate gears, designed not to swing, but to resist motion entirely. H1 had no pendulum. Instead, it used paired balances, two oscillating arms that countered each other's sway. When the sea leaned left, one pulled right, and the rhythm remained. The Royal Society was intrigued. He was granted funds just enough to continue, and so he did. He built H2 larger, more stable, but not yet perfect. For 20 years he refined. He worked alone. No lab, no staff, just a man and the patience of time. Then came H3. It bore new inventions. The bimetallic strip, which resisted temperature changes. The caged roller bearing, which allowed parts to move smoothly with minimal friction. These were not just parts for clocks, but gifts to the future. Yet still, it wasn't enough. The errors were too great for open sea. The dream, still distant. And then, he tried something different, smaller, simpler, unexpected. He built H4, a pocket-sized watch, roughly 5 inches wide, elegant, precise. Inside H4 was the culmination of everything he had learned: temperature-resistant metals, a perfect escapement, a balanced spring that danced like breath. It ticked like a heartbeat, calm, certain. In 1761, H4 was sent to sea, aboard the HMS Deptford on a voyage to Jamaica. The clock was wound, sealed in its box, and left alone for weeks, while the ship swayed and surged. When they reached port, the calculations were done, and H4 had lost just 5 seconds. Not 5 minutes, not hours, 5 seconds. Over thousands of miles, the sea had found its keeper. But time does not always reward those who measure it best. When the HMS Deptford docked in Jamaica in 1761, the crew did more than unload cargo. They delivered proof that time could be trusted across oceans. Harrison's H4 had performed beyond belief. Navigators checked, double-checked, then triple-checked the math, and still, 5 seconds. In the language of navigation, 5 seconds meant less than 2 nautical miles of error. That precision could guide a fleet through fog, around reefs, and home again. And yet, the Board of Longitude, the body assigned to award the prize, did not believe it. They questioned the voyage, the conditions, the hands that wound the watch. They claimed it was too good to be true. John was told he must repeat the trial, and so he did. And again, H4 was near perfect. Still, the prize money did not come. The rules, they said, had not been strictly met. They asked him to build another, to reveal all his secrets, to prove that his miracle could be repeated by others. John complied. He built H5. He shared his knowledge, but each time he gave them what they asked, they moved the goal. Years passed. He was no longer a young man. His hands grew stiff, his eyes dimmed. But he had not wasted his life, because while the board argued, others had seen what mattered. King George III himself took interest. He met John, examined H5, tested it at his own observatory, and when it performed flawlessly, the king grew impatient with injustice. He pressured Parliament, and in 1773, nearly 50 years after John began, he was finally paid the reward. Not in full, not with apology, but enough to mark the end. He was 80 years old, and in the final years of his life, he held in his hands a simple truth. That time, when honored with patience, will reveal what is right. John Harrison died in 1776, 3 years after he received his long-delayed reward. He did not live to see how fully the world would change because of him. But the sea remembered, and the ships remembered, and every sailor who found his way home, without losing time, remembered. His marine chronometers became the standard. They were copied, studied, refined, and soon every major voyage carried one. Longitude was no longer a ghost. It had a number, a confidence, a rhythm. Trade expanded, exploration surged, and the oceans grew, smaller. Even today, the principles John uncovered: thermal compensation, isochronism, shock resistance, live inside the watches we wear, and the systems that guide satellites above. He was not a king, not a professor, not a man with wealth or name, just a boy who listened to a clock and kept listening for 50 years. His grave, simple and unadorned, lies in a quiet churchyard in Hampstead, London. Above it reads, "He who made time tell the truth." And perhaps that is all he ever wanted. Not fame, not fortune, just to make time a little more honest, a little more kind. There's something beautiful in that. The idea that one person, working quietly, without applause, can steady the course of an entire world, not by conquering it, but by understanding it, by listening. Time is still with us, in every ticking watch, in every arrival, every departure, in the way we measure days and moments. But perhaps we rush too much, count too quickly, forget that time isn't always something to beat, but something to befriend. So tonight, when you close your eyes, think of John Harrison, not as a clockmaker, but as a listener, a man who trusted silence, who honored rhythm, who let patience become precision. And in doing so, perhaps our time, too, will be kind. Good night, dream gently. This marks the end of today's journey. I hope your mind feels at peace and relaxed after this wonderful journey. Stay tuned and subscribe to Samra for listening to more such interesting stories. Thank you, and talk to you again.